So, yeah, I'm excited now for the second part of this of CCW Unite. We're now going to be joined by Joan Brierley from the Department of Transport in WA and Reid from ESSSuper. They're both going to be joining us on a panel to discuss whether flexible working really equates to increased agent productivity. So I really can't wait for this chat. We'll talk a lot around our people, the journey we've been through over the past, now I think it's 2 years now. So yeah, and Michael is back and he'll moderate our conversation. So I'm going to hand it over to you all to discuss.
Thanks, Marianne, and yes, thanks everyone, and thanks for stepping in, Marianne, earlier with the conversation with Lyndon, whilst a few of us experienced the wonders of internet outages when working remotely. I think this topic is a really interesting one. It's one I think is really top of mind for a lot of people now, especially as we're starting to see us moving away into a post-COVID world, starting to have cities opening up, and really what are we going to continue within this space? Understanding our productivity, the desire to work from home, how has that changed our world? So we've got two great speakers with us today to take us on that journey. So Lauren and Joan. Joan, I might get you to quickly introduce yourself to everyone, if that's okay.
Yeah, my name's Joan Brierley and I look after service delivery for the Department of Transport in Western Australia. And one of the joys of coronavirus is I was also gifted the 13 COVID hotline for Western Australia. So we do that in addition to our day business. So I look after teams, frontline, back office and contact centres.
Excellent. That would have been a very fun gift. And Lauren, if you could give us an introduction to yourself.
Not a problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Reid. I look after member services at ESSSuper. Us, like a lot of contact centres, have been working remotely for the last almost 2 years now, and working in superannuation during this period has been a really interesting experience. So very excited to share those with some of you today.
Yeah, Lauren, I think last time we chatted, it was really that delve into obviously the changes in super and people tapping into super and everything else as well. And quite interesting struggle through the year of how that sort of all came about. When we're talking about productivity, we really went through this crest of waves through COVID, through the lockdowns, re-lockdowns, all the rest of it. What was the journey like at the start of that? And I might start with you, Lauren, since you're up on my screen. How was that journey working remotely? How did you kind of get into that stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's been it's been a journey and it's been a bit of a roller coaster. It hasn't been a straight line by any way, shape or form. My department are 100% based in Melbourne. So for anyone in Melbourne, as you know, we've had multiple lockdowns. So it's looked a little bit different over the last 2 years. When we first moved to a remote environment, we weren't a contact centre that had any remote presence. So we were 100% in the office. That was a bit of a shock to the system for a lot of people. We did see that there was just, I suppose, a little bit of time taken by employers to find their new operating rhythm in working from home. And we moved home in a bit of a crisis scenario, as everyone did. It wasn't really a smooth, well thought out transition. It was, suddenly this is becoming a very real reality that we need to work from home. We need to deploy the technology in rapid timeframes in about 2 weeks and move everyone in our environments home. So I think it took a couple of people to a bit of time to find their rhythm. And then once we found that, we actually found that we were working incredibly efficiently, considering everything that we were asking of staff during such a challenging time. And especially for us in superannuation, where everyone was calling to talk about whether or not they could obtain their super. It was such a challenging time for people across the country in all industries. We really found our rhythm. And what we found probably more recently, which I would imagine is probably a bit of lockdown fatigue that we're all feeling, especially in Victoria, is there are pockets of people that are still really efficient and really love that working from home environment. And then there are pockets of other people that are probably really holding out for that in-office interaction and probably learn better in that environment. So we've got more of an opportunity to train people in a way that's really meaningful for them. So what my team and I are looking at the moment is knowing going forward, we're going to have a future of flexible work in our organisation, which is great. We're going to have a hybrid model of work from office and work from home. how we best manage that and how we best cater to everyone's needs when it comes to how they learn and how we maintain those efficiencies whilst, I suppose, trying to find the next normal for us in the coming months.
And that's, I think, a really good insight. Like, how are you going about then to identify the personality types? You know, what are those key indicators that are helping you learn that you have to tailor that experience of both workplace and learning? Because I'm sure that's probably what everyone's looking at now. I want to provide a hybrid environment. How do I understand which groups are going to respond well and which groups don't?
Yeah, it's a real challenge because I think over the last year we've really had no choice but to force everyone into one particular learning style and model, which has been virtual and remote because of the nature of the environment that we've had. But actually, my LT and I were just discussing this morning in one of our meetings around what that looks like going forward and how we train people. And one of the biggest indicators for us has been either through our quality assurance and our training and our coaching around what is becoming particularly evident in how people like to learn. We try to be really flexible, again, whilst working 100% virtually right now, to understand like what's the best model and try and spend a lot of time with individuals to ask them, how do you best learn? Are you more of a listener? Do you like to be more hands-on? Do you like to read it yourself, hear it, whatever the case might be? So we've got a really, I feel that we've got a really great onboarding program that allows people to, of all different learning styles, to find something that works for them. And then we'll be able to further adapt that again when we move to sort of more of a hybrid onboarding. But yeah, well, we found that just asking individuals, how do you best learn? How can we best cater this style for you? Or not necessarily when they're just starting with us, but also much further along the journey in the contact centre and their continued development. How do we best continue to support you in an environment that right now provides very little flexibility, but in the future, when we do have a bit more of a hybrid, would you prefer to be in the office more, or do you find it more effective to be at home, or, whatever the case might be, just really letting our staff tell us. I mean, I really like to think that we trust and empower them to tell us how they're best going to perform and how they're best going to strive to work at their best, and you give them absolutely the benefit of the doubt and work with them in that respect to see if we can best support them in that way.
Yeah, and I think, almost that's answering the sort of questions we're going, right? It's not a black and white question around productivity and agents and working from home and working from the office. It's really comes down to personal styles and how to sort of identify and match those. Joan, I'm going to come back to you for a little bit, but I'm sure you went through almost like two styles of journeys here with yourself. You kind of had the existing Department of Transport work you had, but then, as you just said earlier, you had the brand new COVID hotline you had to stand up, and I'm pretty sure both experiences were very interesting and unique. Can you talk us through sort of how those things sort of ran in parallel and the differences, or were they the same?
I think I've got PTSD from that period, and people will go, "Oh my God, WA, they've not had any lockdowns or stuff," but we breathe in and breathe out regularly. As soon as somebody sneezes coming across the border, we shut down. So yeah, you're right. For us, we had a very traditional contact centre. Nobody worked from home. We didn't have technology deployed so people could work from home, and then. I remember it was 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and WA Police rang me and said, "We want to set up the COVID hotline. We want it to go live on Tuesday." We're like, "Okay." And they gave us brand new technology. So we used a cloud-based contact center, which we had no experience with, and we went live Monday afternoon. Now, I'll just tell you that just like everybody else, it was complete chaos because our firewall doesn't actually allow us to access the cloud-based contact center solution. So the police commissioner announced it, and we had people in the office, and all of a sudden we were like, it's not working. And there were not enough mobile phones, and there were not enough laptops in WA for us to deploy people from home. So we actually had to, and we had people who were used to having the team leader there. So we very quickly had to change our recruitment model for people working on 13 COVID. We had to change our training model, which became completely remote. And also we had to work out how we were going to support people at home. So we made this really radical decision, which is, I guess, not like government at all, that we would recruit people who had to provide everything themselves, and all we would give them was the training and the system. And we've got 75 people who we have never actually physically met, and we recruit them virtually. We talk to them about working from home virtually, and we coach and mentor them virtually. So they've actually never the team leaders have once met in 18 months, but the people have never physically met. And we had to then deploy and start to understand how to use Teams and ways to interact. And for us, that was really good. And then we had to think about how do we get our people who had a PC on the desk and a box in the corner for their contact center working from home with technology. And that actually was more of a challenge because they were, the practices that we had were very physical. People were used to touching and feeling things. And we actually found when we sent people home, they were a lot less productive. So it was costing me 25 FTE a week because people were a lot less productive because they weren't used to troubleshooting technological issues. They were used to talking to their colleague if they had a problem. And actually that training of people on how to utilize different methods of connecting became quite a big project for us. And getting people to work from home on laptops, because we had to try and procure them because we didn't have them, became quite a big project for us. And it probably, honestly, it probably took us about 6 months to get into a really good rhythm. So we'd been in and out of lockdown a couple of times, but we now have a really good process and rhythm for bringing people in. So we still physically train people, and then we support them with tools and techniques for if you want to work from home, if you meet the standards to work from home, this is what we will do, and this is what we'll give you, and this is how we'll interact. So we have some virtual teams and some physical teams because it's horses for courses.
You mentioned this, very early in that your productivity took a massive hit. Like, what did you do to sort of bring that back up? Was it really that familiarization, or was there more cultural aspects and people aspects involved?
It's a bit of both, actually. So there was a lot of people who, didn't know how to reset their internet or their Wi-Fi router. There were people who didn't know how to use VPN. So actually what we did was we put together a squad, and it had IT people, it had training people, it had team leaders and supervisors, and it had colleagues. And we sort of, we had a running spreadsheet. IT people will know they usually use Jira. We used a spreadsheet which, gave our IT people PTSD as well. And we just, every time somebody had an issue, we would write it down. And it would be, simple things that people needed to know for their home environment, but things that we needed to fix from an IT environment, and then how we had to change our training. So in the early days, our training team could only do one-on-one training because they didn't have a one-to-many tool that they could use, which made the lead-in time. So, we were trying to onboard people, but it actually meant that it would take weeks for people to be onboarding because you couldn't have 15 people in the classroom, and because we don't have 15 trainers, we only have 4. So it took, weeks and weeks and weeks. So there was lots of things like that. There were some people issues. So I always joke with people that if I worked at home, I'd have the cleanest house in the world because I'm a procrastinator. And we had people who just went, this is not for me. So we had people who lived locally, were on their own, were single people, and they really came to work for that physical interaction and that people interaction. But we had people who live a long way away, and they loved it because, they were saving 2.5 hours travel each day. So some of it was people, some of it was technological, and some of it was as well our team leaders just not knowing how to have a conversation with somebody when they couldn't sit next to them and talk to them about their call handling or how they answered a question. And it didn't help that we were right in the middle of deploying a brand new knowledge management solution and a new contact center solution. So, we didn't do it by halves. We just did everything all at once in a perfect storm. And so our colleagues had a lot of changes, and some of them, to be honest, it was just, oh my gosh, I can't cope with some of this, or I don't have anybody to help me. We had people who've been here a long time. So we've actually built the skills of our people for their private life as well as their professional life. But we actually now know the types of people who work well at home and the types of people who don't. And we give people the option.
So it sounds like now, though, that you've sort of got to the stage where the productivity is sort of restored, you got the gain, everything there. How did you need to adapt how you measured, the core metrics and productivity to account for that? And I think that's obviously something that's going to grow as everyone moves into this hybrid world. What was some of the changes you needed to make in that space?
So I guess some of the changes we made were, our KPIs are very outcome-based, so they're not around widgets and number of calls that you take, because really, if you can resolve everything the first time, that's so much better because you don't drive volume in the future. There was something, so we actually found our email volumes went up. So we still don't have chat or anything like that, that's coming. So our email volumes went up, but we weren't ready for that. And we had people who had never responded to an email. It's a different skill to actually talking to somebody on the phone. So we had to change some of that. We had to change some of our occupancy metrics and talk to people around taking responsibility for their own breaks, because everybody knows, and I'm sure this is Australia-wide, as COVID has progressed, people have got a little bit more antsy, and people are just getting a bit more aggressive and a bit short. So some of the metrics we had to do were around what is our KPI for answering calls, because people's tolerance for waiting and getting their answer reduced. And we're actually seeing that reducing even more as COVID continues, even though, we have no COVID in WA. But as it continues, people are just getting a little bit more, they're abandoning faster than they used to. So some of those metrics had to change. So our staffing models had to change. And from a colleague perspective, we had to really trust them a lot more than we did when we were in the office. So that real-time management became more around real-time responsibility for each person rather than a group of people, being big brother and watching all of that stuff. So I think what we've done is we've provided more empowerment to our people. And what it's done is actually freed up our team leaders to provide that enabling environment. So we don't micromanage them and make sure they log on at the right time and they log off. That, as we've stopped looking at that, our productivity has improved, and we actually find that people's adherence to their schedule is just what it was before people were nagging them. So, we were wasting our energy doing that. So I think we've moved from a sort of a big brother type of approach to one which is around, we know you can do this and you're going to choose to do the right thing, so we're going to trust you to do it. And if there's a consequence if you choose not to do that, of course. But, we're very lucky we've got great people and they tend to do it.
Lauren, was it a very similar experience for yourselves, that concept and change around the mentality of Big Brother to trust enablement, and then obviously the consequence and change you need to do with your measures and metrics? I've always been a leader that's very much, I give trust up front, and I expect, if people don't, or they take advantage of me, then that might look a little bit different. But, that Big Brother concept in a contact center can be really... can be common, and I think it's a really old-fashioned way of looking at it. That really wasn't so much of a change for us, but we had a lot of changes in regards to just the processes that existed in the office couldn't exist in a remote environment. And there were a lot of things that hadn't really been thought through when we had moved home that started to become apparent within the first couple of weeks of being remote. And that's not for, lack of thinking on anyone's part in particular. It was such a crisis situation in the scenario in which we moved home. And, so we really had to think about, we actually formed working groups in our business to tackle some of those issues. So, for example, there were a lot of processes that needed to change. We had a lot of members obviously wanting to obtain their funds or just standard practices with us where we didn't have digital verification. So being in financial services, you need to validate who you are every time you do a transaction. So certifying ID when you're in lockdown, nowhere's available to certify it. Understandably, people at like a chemist or police station don't want to certify a document because they don't want to change over the pens and sign everything. That was a real problem for us. So we needed to find out different processes for that, for example. So it was one kind of working group that we had, but we had others around like keeping the culture alive at home, but it was defining what the culture at home looked like, because the social fabric and the network in the office no longer existed. And it was very unclear in the beginning how long that would last for. I don't think any of us thought it would last almost 2 years, but here we are.
And we needed to redefine what that looked like at home. And it was really top of mind and really important for me that we were on that from day one. So I really clearly remember talking to my team the last day we were in the office and saying, tomorrow when we log on, these are the operating rhythms and the practices that I feel that we're going to need to have to maintain social connection. Just the small things that you miss out on, like the water cooler conversations, the conversations in the kitchen, the passing comments, all that kind of. I didn't want the team to miss out on those experiences. So, there was a lot. There was a lot of change management from lots of different aspects that we were really quite heavily focused on when we moved home. But, Joan's absolutely right. Trust was. We wouldn't have survived without the trust of the team and the trust in one another, because at the end of the day, we were all going through the same stresses and concerns around like what the future was holding. So, work was one element of a very like scary picture at one point. So, that really helped our staff to feel a bit more relaxed and feel that they could come to us when there were concerns and we could work through them, as opposed to, watching the stats of the contact centre from the outside and just assuming that someone might be maybe slacking off because they weren't doing what they were previously doing. But in fact, perhaps they were actually really struggling with the environment that they were in. So having that psychological safety within the group to have an open and honest conversation allowed us to turn that around really quickly. So.
And do you think that really helped in terms of the... Oh, sorry, Joan.
Well, I was just going to say, I agree with that, because one of the things that we didn't realise was about that, and probably quite naively, we actually needed to engage our employee assistance people, because right at the very beginning, when nobody knew, and I put my hand up, I'm one of those people who thought this would be over and done with within 3 months or so, and we didn't realise how much it was really important to provide all of those connections to our employee assistance program, because people were going through a professional change, but they were going through a personal change, and the fear that people had right at the very beginning was really real and true, and people didn't know. What we found was people didn't know, were there going to be mass deaths. They've got older people that they live with, and they're being asked to be a bit in the office, a bit work from home, or they've been in the office with lots of people. So we didn't recognise that, and we actually had to bring our employee assistance people in, and they've got different ways of connecting, because it used to be, you'd have a meeting or you'd do a phone conversation, but now completely different ways of doing it, and we have regular engagement with our employee assistance people now, and they've been on the journey with us for the last 2 years.
And it'd be fair to say that both those things, I think, from the sounds of it, helped then do that ongoing day-to-day motivation, within your organizations that struggle. I think a lot of people struggle with remote working, where some people are very, I think you guys have talked about it before, some people are very task orientated. They love it because they can just go click, click, click through. Others need a little bit more in their personality styles, and having that cultural setup, those ritual setups, allows that connection between the both groups and keep that motivation going. Both of you so far talked about, this kind of now return to work being this hybrid model, this kind of support for people who want to be there, support for people who want to work from home. I can imagine for a lot of us now that's going to start causing this sense of, I suppose, disconnect between those groups potentially. Like, how do we start thinking differently about ensuring that we treat groups who are working from home and people in the office the same, not giving unfair advantages one to the other? I think that's sort of the growing point of view as well, especially when, we fall back into our old traps around metrics and measures and things like that, and circumstances needed to take account. I might start with you, Joan, since you're on the screen. But yeah, what's your thoughts on how do we kind of keep evolving this?
So we're not going to fall back into all those old traps. There's no point going backwards. We just want to go forwards. So some of the things that we do now, you're right. It's interesting. People go, we miss out on the morning teas or things. So last week there was a big morning tea for somebody who was having a baby, and we had people at home. And all we do is we now have Teams meetings with them if they're working from home, and they get to participate in the morning tea just as much as everybody else. So it's actually about thinking slightly differently around the rituals and the ways that you do it. So our 13 COVID line, they've never met each other. They regularly have team meetings. We use Microsoft Teams for most things. They regularly have team meetings and morning teas. They have games, so we do lots of virtual games and virtual jigsaws and things. So we've actually found different ways of connecting and keeping the team together, regardless of whether you're in the office or you're not in the office. And that you're right, Lauren mentioned that water cooler talk. So we try to, there's a lot of chat that goes on in Teams, and it is very much around that water cooler talk and, oh my gosh, I've just heard this. So we don't stop that, because that brings that connectivity to those people who are not physically here but still feel that they are part of the team. So we've just had to change a lot of those rituals and things, and I don't think that will change in the future. It was interesting, one of the teams had drinks after work the other day, and they all just were on their cameras with, you know, their glass of wine or their beer or whatever they were having, and for an hour they just sat there in a sort of not a work environment, but having a private conversation and a team chat and things like that. So I just think that we have found some different ways to connect, and in the future, that's a great way to attract new employees, because younger people are not used to being in the office forever. They like to have that flexibility, and I think that we now have some foundations that will enable us to attract and retain those people who want that flexibility but still want that connection with other people. And younger people are much more used to, I can say that because I'm an old codger, much more used to connecting using technology than we are, because when I was younger, we didn't have any of this stuff. So I think they're taking to it like a duck to water, and they're bringing people like me on the journey, with them.
Awesome, Lauren. Same sort of thing. I think obviously you're right in the think of how that's going to happen. We're all getting a lockdown starting to drop now in Melbourne. What are those ways you're going to make sure that you keep that sense of connectedness and equalness between remote and in-office workers?
Yeah, look, Joan's exactly right. Like, it's just about moving forward, and there's lots of ways and ideas to do that. One of the things that I've been really strict on with the team is the rituals and what that looks like in a hybrid environment, to make sure that everyone is included, regardless of whether they're at home or in the office on that particular day. I want it to be a very inclusive environment and for people to be seen and heard. So one particular example of how we've done that is we have morning buzz sessions, or like operational check-ins, that I know a lot of teams do have. And when we have done the odd hybrid stint in between our lockdowns in Melbourne, one thing that we do is we ask each individual to log into Zoom from their desk. So it's not the group of people in the office together as a team and then everyone at home by themselves individually logged in. I just feel like that's been a really good example of how everyone can feel like it's an equal playing field. And we had really good response from that. And that's what it looks like from home. Obviously, everyone's a face in a box on the screen, so it looks no different in the office, so people don't feel left out. We've set up like a team run by the department for the department, like it's called Culture and Wellness Group. So it looks at wellness and well-being and maintaining the culture in a virtual environment, in a hybrid environment, in a 100% office environment, if that's the case on a particular day. So they look at a lot of activities that's driven by them, for them, and that's really well received by the group. And making sure that the things that can't happen in a physical environment doesn't mean that it can't happen in a virtual. So like virtual drinks, the team have done that regularly, keeping that connectiveness together on a Friday afternoon. One other thing that the group have done more recently, which I found quite funny, we use Microsoft Teams for our chat, and there's a bit of a running joke in our business that the contact center is the chattiest of all of the groups, and like you can't stop them from trying to have a chat, keep them away from the office will not stop them. So they've got the Microsoft Teams chat as a department for, like product questions to one another, or process questions, the things that you would miss out on in the office when you directly talk to the other person. But they've created a separate one for people that want to be involved in what's just called the banter chat. And it's just the banter that you miss in the office, replicated in a chat. If you want to be part of it, great. If you don't want to be part of it, that's also okay. But it's just, I had to laugh at that because I feel like that's just context into life to a T. So things like that.
Exactly. Exactly. I feel like 90% of my team's chat are just banter chat, but yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, it's really bringing us, this is bringing us, unfortunately, to time. I think both of you guys have obviously started to really shape out what we're really doing. And I think the key there is showing that productivity, it actually does come down to the individual, and flexible working for us means that we can provide multiple solutions on how we work with our teams and our staff, and ways we need to think and change going forward. And that really gets us to that ability to tailor our productivity to the individual, which then obviously helps experience. So thank you both. I look forward to hearing more of your stories when we get together in the Gold Coast early next year, face to face. But I hope this panel was really insightful to everyone.